Hey everyone, and welcome to this deep dive, your deep dive into, well, all things Prisoner of Azkaban. We're going deep with those excerpts you provided, specifically looking at how the Dursleys, or rather their absence, plays into things, the whole magical creatures situation, and obviously that ever-present fear factor that just kind of seeps into everything.
You know, it's fascinating how intertwined those elements become in this book, right? It's not just about the events themselves, but how they hit Harry differently this time around, especially with the Dursleys kind of out of the picture for a good chunk of the summer.
Right. Usually he's stuck with them to the last possible second before Hogwarts. But this time, boom, he's out of Privet Drive early on. You'd think, freedom, hanging with the Weasleys, Diagon Alley, that's got to be carefree, right? Especially compared to his usual summer gig.
Seems like it, doesn't it? And we see that joy, the birthday gifts, the excitement in Diagon Alley with the new wand and all. But there's this underlying tension almost, that moment, you know, when he's relishing the freedom, but his stomach does that funny jolt thing. That's foreshadowing right there, like a shadow lurking.
Oh, for sure. Bittersweet is the word.
Yeah.
Turning 13, more time away from the Dursleys than ever before, but it's temporary. That dread of going back, it never really goes away, does it?
Nope, it's like a ticking time bomb.
Yeah.
Breakfast at the Leaky Cauldron's all well and good, but that return to Privet Drive, it hangs over everything. Thinking about the Dursleys and how this escape, even temporary, plays out, do you think it changes Harry's outlook this year?
Right. Does it change how he approaches things?
See, that's where it gets interesting. That Dursley-free period, short as it is, it's like a crack in Harry's usual world. He's not going straight from their oppression into Hogwarts. He's had time to breathe, connect with his friends, experience a different kind of freedom, you know? And that allows for new experiences, relationships to flourish, makes him more, receptive to the challenges and the good stuff that Hogwarts throws at him.
So he's starting the year on a more level playing field, emotionally, not already beaten down before he even sets foot in the castle.
Exactly. He's not starting under their thumb. And that has this ripple effect, more independent, more willing to take risks. And that sets the stage for a very different kind of year. It's like he's got this newfound strength, resilience, and it's partly because the Dursleys were out of the picture a bit longer.
It's like their absence, in a weird way, actually helps him grow.
It's that whole what doesn't kill you thing, right?
Yeah.
Only this time, it lets Harry step into himself, become a bit more of who he's capable of being.
That is a great point. It's like the lack of that constant negativity gives him the space to breathe and develop. But speaking of different, can we talk about the magical creatures in this book? Because Prisoner of Azkaban, they really upped their game. We're not talking Fluffy and Fox anymore. I mean, the night bus alone, Ernie Prang, shrinking beds, careening through London, utter chaos.
Oh, a total chaos. And it throws us headfirst into this whole new level of magical creatures, each with their own quirks and challenges.
And challenges are right. Who can forget the Monster Book of Monsters? Hagrid giving that thing to 13-year-olds. Recipe for disaster.
Oh, 100%.
Right.
But it does make you think, how are these creatures treated in the wizarding world? And what does that say about the wizards themselves?
Such a good question. I think it's something we should definitely dive into.
Let's do it.
Yeah. It's not all sunshine and butterbeers with these creatures, is it? Things get kind of ethically murky, especially with how wizards view and treat them. What's your take on that whole side of things?
Oh, man, it's complicated, right? I mean, look at Buckbeak, the hippogriff. He's this proud, majestic being, but he gets judged, condemned, based on fear and prejudice. That trial, heartbreaking.
Totally. Seeing Buckbeak like that, so unfairly treated, and it's not just him, is it? That whole prejudice against magical creatures, it's everywhere in the wizarding world.
It's woven right in, yeah. House elves, goblins, werewolves like poor Remus Lupin, all marginalized, misunderstood. Makes you wonder who the real monsters are sometimes, you know. Speaking
of Lupin, he brings another creature into the mix, the werewolf. How does that tie into this fear and prejudice we're talking about?
Werewolves are fascinating, right? That duality, the control versus instinct thing. It taps into our fear of the unknown, of losing control. And for Lupin, it's even more intense because he's constantly battling this part of himself, trying to be accepted. It's a metaphor, almost, for how fear and prejudice can isolate and demonize people.
We fear what we don't understand, and that fear, so often, it becomes prejudice.
Sadly, yes. And in Prisoner of Azkaban, fear is almost like its own character, you know, it just seeps into everything. But werewolves aren't the only creatures tied to fear in this book. The Grimm, for instance.
Oh, right. Hagrid's Grimm, that spectral dog, the harbinger of death.
Exactly. And who's the one who keeps seeing it? Harry. who's already dealing with the fear of losing his parents. It's this constant reminder of mortality, adding another layer to the whole fear theme.
Like his own personal Dementor following him around. Speaking of which, those things are straight up nightmare fuel, sucking the joy out of everything.
There's something else, aren't they? Preying on Harry so specifically, making him relive his worst memories, his deepest fears.
That scene on the train when it enters the compartment, bone-chilling, even reading it.
Rowling nails that psychological horror, that utter despair. And Harry's reaction, it's more than just physical harm, right? They tap into that core fear, losing his parents.
No doubt. And that fear they create, it's palpable. But here's the thing. Dementors are terrifying on their own, but the book also shows us how fear itself is a weapon.
Absolutely. Sirius Black's escape, for example. All the rumors, they create this paranoia, this fear that affects everyone, even Dumbledore and McGonagall.
Totally. Making decisions based on an assumed threat, on what Sirius Black might do, they're controlled by fear, too.
It shows how easily fear can be manipulated to control others. And it's not just about Sirius. Snape. He practically weaponizes fear in his classroom.
Oh, yeah. Intimidation, fear of his wrath, that's his style. But Snape's interesting because it's almost like his use of fear comes from his own insecurities, his past.
You're right. He's complex, driven by fear, but also capable of love, loyalty, as we see later on. It reminds us that even the scariest people are often driven by their own fears. But going back to Sirius, it makes you wonder, is he really the biggest threat in Prisoner of Azkaban?
Good question. As we learn more about Sirius, we realize things aren't always as they seem. And speaking of which, we have to talk about the Marauder's map. This magical object, it seems like it offers Harry freedom, a way to explore Hogsmeade.
That map changes the game, that's for sure. But like a lot of powerful magic in the wizarding world, it's not without its risks.
Double-edged sword, right. Lets Harry explore, feel free, especially with the Dursleys in the back of his mind. But it also leads to trouble. Getting confiscated by Lupin, of all people.
The irony is fantastic. Lupin, a marauder himself, confiscating the map. But it's who he is, cautious, protective of Harry. Makes you think, what if things went differently? If Harry went to Hogsmeade earlier, overheard that conversation at the Three Broomsticks, would Sirius still be on the run?
So many what-ifs in this book.
Yeah.
Makes you question everyone's choices.
That's what keeps us hooked, right?
Yeah.
Always wondering. But that eavesdropping scene, it's crucial. Harry learns the truth about Sirius, best friend wrongly accused. It shatters that image of Sirius as this monster, and it makes us question everything about trust, betrayal, truth. It all circles back. Who are the real prisoners here?
Oh, good one. Who do you think the real prisoners are?
I think it's bigger than just being locked up, It's about being trapped by fear, by prejudice, the past. Sirius is physically imprisoned, yeah, but he's also a prisoner of his guilt, his grief over James and Lily. Lupin, he's a prisoner of being a werewolf. Literally, but also in how he has to live, in the shadows. Even Harry, even with the Dursleys out of sight for a bit, he's a prisoner of his past, of Voldemort's return.
Wow. It really makes you think about all the ways we can be imprisoned, even without bars. But there's another layer to this, isn't there? The idea that we can be imprisoned by our own choices, by the paths we don't take.
Absolutely. Look at Peter Pettigrew. He's living as a rat, a prisoner of his own fear, his cowardice. That choice he made to betray James and Lily, it's haunted him ever since, forced him into this half-life.
It's like he's trapped in his own guilt and fear. And it all goes back to choices, consequences, stuff that started way before Prisoner of Azkaban even begins.
Exactly. That's why this book is so good. It's not just magical adventures, it's about us, about human nature, the choices we make, how they affect everyone. And sometimes those choices, they have consequences that keep coming back long after we've made them.
We've covered so much in this deep dive. Dursleys, creatures, fear, and we're still just scratching the surface of what Prisoner of Azkaban is really about.
Oh yeah, there's so much more to unpack here, so many connections.
And I'm ready to unpack it all. Let's take a quick break, folks, and when we come back, we'll dive into Sirius Black's story, the truth about Peter Pettigrew, and the power of love and sacrifice in the face of, well, everything scary. Stay tuned.
All right, so we've talked about prisoners, literal and figurative, and that whole cloud of fear hanging over Prisoner of Azkaban. But this is where things get flipped on their head, right? Sirius Black, not the villain we thought he was. Framed by Peter Pettigrew. Good old Scabbers. Talk about a twist.
Rowling played us all, right? The supposed monster, actually a victim. And the harmless pet, the real danger. Makes you rethink everything you thought you knew. Don't judge a book by its cover or a rat by its, well, ratness. But Pettigrew, the way he plays everyone, acts weak, innocent, chilling.
It's deception at its finest. We can be fooled so easily, even by people we think we know. Pettigrew, he uses those prejudices, that assumption that a rat's no threat, plays it to his advantage.
Oh, absolutely. But even with all that darkness, we see some serious courage, too. Harry facing those Dementors to save Sirius.
No, that's a powerful scene. Determined to save his godfather, facing his biggest fear. And remember, he's not even supposed to be out after dark, let alone fighting Dementors. Breaking the rules, risking it all, because he knows in his heart Sirius is innocent.
And that's what makes Harry... Oh, and don't forget, first corporeal Patronus. That's not just a spell, it's his inner strength. Hope, love, all that, pushing back against fear.
And it's a stag, just like his dad's. Even when things are darkest, he's connected to his parents, to their love.
Speaking of his parents, that ending, man. Seeing his dad across the lake, or so he thinks, conjuring the Patronus. Heartbreaking, because we know it's not James. Just shows how much Harry misses them, that family he never really had.
It does. But it also adds a layer of mystery, don't you think? If it wasn't James who conjured that Patronus, powerful magic that.
Right. Does Rowling ever actually say, in the later books, I mean?
She doesn't outright confirm it. But remember when Dumbledore says Harry might have saved Voldemort, a deputy who was in his debt? He meant Pettigrew. And he hinted that saving someone can create a kind of magical bond.
Hold on, are you suggesting...
It's possible that Harry, by saving Pettigrew, might have accidentally set something in motion. Something that could even play a part in Voldemort's downfall, eventually.
Whoa. Mind blown. It's like every action, even the good ones, they have these ripples, these consequences we can't even predict.
Exactly. Prisoner of Azkaban, it's about facing those fears, fighting for what's right, and realizing things aren't always what they seem. But more than that, it's about how love, hope, those things matter, even in the darkest times.
This deep dive has been incredible. We've uncovered so much about Prisoner of Azkaban, from those darker themes to those glimmers of hope. But, you know, there's always more to explore in the wizarding world. What's the one thing you hope our listeners will take away from this conversation?
I hope it makes them think about the characters, those tough choices they face, and how those choices ripple out. And maybe, just maybe, how it all connects to our own lives.
Perfectly put. And on that note, we'll leave you with a final thought. What if you had a time turner, like Hermione? Knowing what you know now, would you change any of your choices? Something to think about as you journey on through the wizarding world. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. We'll see you next time.